Guitar Collector Guy presents my tribute to the Man in Black. To me, Johnny Cash was one of the first kind of musical rebels, kind of punk in his own way and sensibilities. Always a big fan of him and have loved his music since I was a little kid. My dad used to play it all the time for me when I was growing up. I was reading a website recently about interesting facts about Johnny Cash, as well as on Wikipedia, and they both claim that Johnny didn't have a first name until he enlisted in the Air Force, that the recruiter wouldn't take him until he actually had a first name. He couldn't go by J.R. Cash. So they both state that he was born J.R. Cash, and that on that day he actually picked the name John and was known from that point forward as John R. Cash going forward. I actually found a copy of his birth certificate and I blew it up on the screen so I could read it. And it's from his museum. And it basically states on the museum that he was actually born as John R. Cash and not J.R. Cash as they report that he was. But no matter what his name was, he'll always be remembered as the Man in Black. When he was asked why he wore all black, he basically said that he did it on behalf of the poor and the hungry. He did it during the 1960s as kind of a protest to the Vietnam War, that it was to symbolize mourning. You know, up to prior to before that, it wasn't political or anything like that. He just liked the color black. And quite honestly, the first band that he had, it was the only color that all of them had as matching shirts. He said that in a report that he wore all black on behalf of the poor and hungry, the prisoner who has long paid for his crime, and those who have been betrayed by age or drugs. He added, with the Vietnam War as painful in my mind as it was most other Americans, I wore it in mourning for the lives that could have been. Apart from the Vietnam War being over, I don't see much reason to change my position. The old are still neglected, the poor are still poor, the young are still dying before their time, and we're not making many moves to make things right. There's still plenty of darkness to carry off. I don't know if he actually said that, but it's amazingly poetic and kind of adds to the lore of who he was as a person. So switching here, I found this absolutely beautiful Telecaster neck. It's a Mexican-made Fender Player neck that was probably one of the best and most beautiful roasted maple necks I've ever seen. And I picked it up and didn't really have a project for it and just kind of set it off to the side. I mentioned recently that I've moved recently, and as a result, I had to pack up a lot of stuff and discovered things that I had that I had kind of forgotten that I had. So when I saw a guy had a used Player's Telecaster body, I decided to go ahead and get it, to go ahead and put this together. And at first I looked for all black hardware, and I kind of was looking for kind of a theme of almost like blackout. But then, I decided that, having a black pickguard, not a multi-layer pickguard, so it doesn't have white, with the black body and the roasted maple neck would be dark enough. And then, kind of the accents of chrome hardware would actually complement well. Then I picked up a 1950s set of reproduction pickups for it. Basically decided to move forward and build also a standard Telecaster wiring harness and put this thing together. So altogether, this build cost me about $675, about $275 for the used body with a lot of hardware like the bridge already on it. Around the same price for a new neck with tuners. About $20 for the components to build out the wiring harness. I scrounged the control plate, but that would have been another $10 to $15 if you had to buy it. I also had the knobs and things like that. The pickups were, I believe, about $79. And then I basically bought everything on a combination of kind of three places: Reverb, eBay, and Amazon.com. I like builds like this every once in a while that are kind of easy, where all the parts are actually from pretty much the same manufacturer. At least the neck and the body are both from Fender. They're both designed to fit together perfectly. You're not going to have to really probably worry about, neck alignment. Matter of fact, it's the only type of build where I'll slap the neck on it And then once I'm done, I actually put a full set of 6 strings in it. I'm not doing the, low E and high E string to make sure that it's aligned properly, because I'm not drilling holes in the neck to align with the guitar. So it's almost like taking a break kind of build, where, it's just kind of less in complexity and more fun, and takes a lot less time to do. If you like this video, click like, subscribe, and notify. So I decided to go a little bit different route for, putting the ground on the bridge. And I saw a person do this recently where they took a wire, stripped off basically the pushback shield, and then soldered it to the ground on the actual pickup itself, and then pushed it up where it was up against the body. And it's a kind of a perfect way of doing the bridge ground. And then what's great about it then is you only have one ground wire basically running to the control panel from the bridge. So I've finally ordered some solder lugs, and the proper screws. For this, I again had to take a string tree and actually use it as kind of a modified ground attachment to the body. And it's pretty easy to do. You just solder a wire to ground wire to one side, and then it already has a screw hole, and you just kind of screw it into the body. But I ordered like 20 of each, and so I'll finally be actually using the right parts instead of kind of scrounging and coming up with kind of ad hoc solutions to a problem. So again, I kind of followed the advice of a viewer where I did all of the hot leads coming into this, and at the very end, I basically took all of the grounds and soldered all of the grounds at one time. And I agree, it is a much more kind of organized approach to doing and building a wiring harness like this. So I found an error in my wiring, and you'll see me here plugging in an amp, and then I use a metal object to switch between the three different positions and then touch the pole pieces on the amp to make sure that you hear an audible click. And what I found right away was in the bridge only position, I wasn't getting anything at all, but I was getting stuff. The bridge pickup was showing up in the middle position as well as the neck. And then the neck by itself was working fine. And so I took the control panel out and just sat and kind of methodically compared it to the control panel wiring diagram that I had. And I like this one from Tone Shapers. It's a nice colored and easy to follow diagram that I've kind of hung on to. And I know how to do this without it, but the diagram I think is smart to have it. What I did find though was there was actually a wire on the 3-position control switch that looked like it was soldered properly, and it wasn't. And so I found it to be loose, and once I heated it with the solder, allowed the solder to flow properly around the wire, and then I tested again, basically it worked right away. So this kind of is a great example of why you really want to test, before throwing this thing together and already having a set of strings and stuff on it. Especially, I guess it's more applicable on a Stratocaster where you'd actually have to take the strings off and pull the, the pickguard off. A Telecaster is a little more forgiving with the control panel, but you never know. I mean, it might have been something, maybe my ground to the back of the bridge. I don't know. It was shorting out. You just never know. And so, but it was here I finally tested again after making the fix, and everything worked. The bridge position worked beautifully, and so on. And I knew that I probably had a pretty good functioning circuit at that point. It was okay for me to move forward with the assembly of the guitar. So the neck relief on this guitar was set up pretty well. One thing I did find later was when I was setting up string height is this guitar, quite honestly, is really, really close to almost needing a shim. But it's literally like right on the edge. And so I wasn't bottoming out when I was trying to set string height, the low E and high E, but pretty close. As long as there's still some movement, I'm good with not putting a shim in it. So before really checking, string height and intonation, you really want to do a really good solid bassline play, tuning in the playing position. And then anytime you make any type of an alteration or adjustment, you want to re-baseline your tuning. And if it was a Stratocaster, you'd have to go through and make sure that you're tuning all the wires, primarily because of the tremolo. But Telecasters have a tendency of being a little more forgiving, where you can make a change on one string and find that the other strings are still pretty much dialed in and tuned properly. So the string height, I did have to drop the strings or the saddles down a little bit. And when I got the saddle or the bridge was pretty much flat. So I had to adjust then the saddle heights to follow the curvature of the radius of the neck. So I'm going to have another camera set up here very shortly, because I had a problem where, again, my head, when I'm filming in playing positions, sometimes my head blocks out what I'm actually doing. And so when I was measuring intonation, I really didn't get any good video for that. And so sorry about that. But the intonation actually was fairly close. The low E string was the only string that I really had to make a change. It was flat, considerably flat actually, and I ended up having to then move the saddle forward. So it's flat equals forward, sharp equals back for the saddle direction that you move in. And then I'm happy with how this build turned out. It's a beautiful guitar. I am probably going to do one more thing to it. I'm probably going to ultimately get a pair of the Fender Vintage Modern tuners. They look like vintage tuners, but they fit in 10 millimeter holes and have the traditional Fender 2-pin. But it makes it look like the older style, and I like the slotted tuners better anyways. I went and showed it to my wife because to me it's an amazingly kind of beautiful guitar, and I was really kind of proud of putting it together. And she asked me, did you name it, or what's the reason that you built this one? And it immediately popped out that I called her JC for Johnny Cash, and that it was kind of my tribute to the Man in Black. And so that's kind of where I got the idea for this. And she is an absolutely gorgeous guitar and plays really, really beautifully. Everything about this guitar is beautiful. I'm really happy with how this turned out. Thank you for watching Guitar Collector Guy. Really appreciate you being here. Hope you come back and watch more. If you like this video, click like, subscribe, and notify.